Hi, this is Mary McCord from the Missoula City County Health Department.
And this is Rebecca Morley from the Missoula City County Health Department. And we're here on behalf of Graduation Matters Student Wellness Council to talk to you about This Is Your Brain on sugar's effect on academic performance and behavior.
And so we have offered this course before in a PIR setting, and we have agreed with MCPS that it probably is best if we record it so you can listen to the 2-hour presentation on your own time. So today's learning objectives are: we're hoping you're able to understand the effects of excess sugar on children's health, academic performance, and behavior. We are hoping that you will learn how to distinguish between natural sugars and added sugars and demonstrate that understanding. And we are hoping that you're going to be able to incorporate healthy nutrition strategies in your school and especially in your classrooms. So first we're going to talk about the impact of overconsumption of sugar in children. And what we know is that one of the things that has changed in our culture drastically is childhood obesity. It has been on a very steep rise since 1970, and a lot of that has to do with added sugar in our current diets. And we also know that overconsumption of sugar impacts memory, learning, and mood, and it displaces nutrient-dense foods. In order for you to rethink the role of sugar in your classroom and school, we need to talk about the why.
So we're going to begin with the story of Susie and Sammy. And we'd like you to keep them in mind as we go through this presentation, because Susie and Sammy may be members of your classroom. And we know that as teachers, you want to serve them in a way that helps them to optimally learn. So Susie and Sammy, they come from a single-parent household. Their dad left when they were about 5 years old. Their mom is struggling, working 2 different part-time jobs. She's a little bit overweight, and she came from a family where there was no dad either. So she dropped out of school when she was 16, had the children when she was 17, and since then she's been doing her best to raise these kids on her own, but it's been a struggle. Even with 2 jobs, money is tight. The kids are 11 now. They're more or less latchkey kids. They come home from school and they play video games and watch TV till their mom comes home, snack a little bit on whatever's in the house, and mom gets home about 7:30 and she'll fix dinner for them, and they do their homework, and their mom, Amanda, is doing the very best job that she can.
Why are we going to focus on sugar? Every day, the average American consumes almost 3 times more sugar than recommended. Liquid sugar, sugar in beverages like soda and sports drinks, is the single largest source of added sugar in the American diet. And there's growing scientific evidence showing that too much sugar is linked to diabetes, heart disease, and liver disease. Today, 31% of American adults and 13% of kids suffer from non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
And this is so different than in the 1970s, where there were only 3 to 5% of children who had non-fatty liver disease. So there's a correlation between the high fructose corn syrup and added sugars in the diet of today's children compared to what children were eating back before the 70s. We're going to look at some sugar in common snacks also. So how much sugar do you think kids should have? Well, we know according to the American Heart Association, women should have no more than about 6 teaspoons of added sugar a day, and men no more than 9 teaspoons of sugar a day. This is a bit of a trick question when we look at kids, because the American Association of Pediatrics actually does not have an amount of sugar that kids should have, because what they're saying is kids really don't need any sugar at all. But using our common sense, we would think that children, smaller body size, should probably have less sugar than women or men. So I don't know, maybe 3-4 teaspoons. It's really hard to decide that. So you might want to know, what are added sugars? There are so many names for added sugars, they're hidden in the label, and it's hard to understand what's a sugar and what's not. But anything that ends in OSE, an OS, is a sugar. And we have all these other kinds of sugar too, like high fructose corn syrup, cane juice, evaporated corn sweetener, crystal dextrose, sugar cane juice, fruit nectars, molasses, syrups of all different kinds. So there are a lot of ways that sugar can be added to food, and the only way to really know is to go ahead and read the label. So naturally occurring sugars are those that naturally occur in foods, of course, like milk, yogurt, plain yogurt, apples, whatever, have some sugar in them, but they're natural sugars, and they take a little bit longer to digest than the added sugars. Those added sugars are added during processing, and it's usually to help with preservation, because we know that high levels of sugar will not allow bacteria and viruses to grow, and also for increased taste preference. They're using added sugars. So what are the major sources of added sugars? Let's take a look at that. The number one, of course, is soda pop and sports drinks. So they're a big danger to our teenagers. Number two is grain-based desserts, like cupcakes, donuts, cakes, Pop-Tarts, all of those. Number three is fruit drinks. Number four is dairy desserts. Number five is candy. And number six are those sugar-sweetened cereals that are so common with our kids. So let's see if you can guess the sugar content on a few beverages that are common. What do you think a 20-ounce Coke would have? How about a 32-ounce Mountain Dew? 16-ounce Monster drink, or 12-ounce Dr. Pepper, or maybe a 32-ounce Snapple drink, or a 32-ounce Powerade. Well, I'll tell you, the 20-ounce Coke Classic has about 16.25 teaspoons of sugar, and it has 2.5 servings, not just one serving, but according to the old label standards, there are 2.5 servings in the bottle. Luckily, we're having some major label changes so that the amount that's normally consumed by a person, for instance, this whole 20-ounce bottle will be considered one serving. The 32-ounce Mountain Dew has 31 teaspoons of sugar. That is about 4 servings in the bottle. The 16-ounce Monster drink has 13.5 teaspoons, and there's 2 servings in that can. The 12-ounce Dr. Pepper has 10 teaspoons of sugar, and that's just 1 serving. A 32-ounce Sweet Tea Snapple, this one is the one that really surprises me. It's got actually 25 teaspoons of sugar, and yet you might think that you're doing your body well by changing over to Snapple, which has lots of antioxidants. You can read the label. It has vitamin C. It's all natural, but it's high in sugar, and it's 4 servings. Most of us, if we were hiking, we'd probably drink that whole thing down within a couple hours. The Powerade, that 32-ounce Powerade, it actually has 16 teaspoons of sugar. So the Powerade is about half of what soda pop is, but it's just way too much. Remember that a man should only have 9 teaspoons, a woman 6. All of these drinks that are illustrated here go above our sugar limit for the day, not including any other food whatsoever. So we want to beware of added sugar in snacks. We just have a few snacks here, and we want you to see if you can match the number of teaspoons with the food item that you see in front of you. So Costco muffin, what do you think? 4, 7, 12, or 19? How about a Yoplait yogurt? A Mountain Dew, a 20-ounce one, not the 32-ounce, but the 20-ounce. And then a regular store-bought cupcake with frosting. So in your minds, mentally think and match these up. Let's see if you're right. So the Costco muffin has about 12 teaspoons of sugar that's added. The Yoplait yogurt has about 4 teaspoons of added sugar. Your Mountain Dew 20-ounce has 19.25 teaspoons of sugar. So you can see it's almost a teaspoon per ounce when we're looking at the soda pops. And 7 teaspoons of added sugar in a cupcake. So again, having these treats in a child's life really overdoes their sugar by huge amounts. Let's look at consumption of sugar-sweetened beverage as a public health issue. So studies have supported that there is a link between sugar-sweetened beverages, that are consumed in childhood and unhealthy weight gain and other poor health outcomes. As we saw, it was the number one source of sugar in the American diet. We've also found that removing sugar-sweetened beverages from schools and replacing with healthier beverages has shown moderate success in curbing unhealthy weight gain. And so it really is a public health initiative that we are promoting the reduction of sugar-sweetened beverages in the schools.
So often in our school systems, we hear a perennial fight about chocolate milk. And we feel strongly that we need to chat with teachers in MCPS district and other districts for that matter about chocolate milk versus juice, because as we know, children will have the option when they go to the lunchroom to choose between milk and juice. They can choose white milk, which is really the preference, or they can choose chocolate milk, or they can choose juice. Well, there's a couple of things that have happened in our culture. Kids are used to sweetened everything, and so they, of course, prefer chocolate milk. But we want to show you how the True Moo chocolate milk that is served by the district is actually a better choice than the 100% pure orange juice. So in the True Moo milk, you can see that it is fat-free, the one that is served in the district, and it has 18 grams of total sugar. But of those, 12 grams are lactose, a natural sugar, and there is 6 grams added sugar, which is 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. And so why would we be proposing anything that had added sugar? Well, as I said earlier, we would prefer the children choose the white milk, the unflavored milk. But it's important to understand that the milk consumption has gone down drastically in children. And the advantages of having them drink milk of any type is that they get their calcium, protein, and vitamin D. And what we're finding is that nationally, there are middle school children that are already having some bone density problems, and that's because they're not drinking milk early on. What the juice has, there's no doubt about it, the advantage of the juice is vitamin C. And the juice itself has 12 grams of sugar, but that's a natural sugar. There's no added sugar in the 100% pure orange juice. There are orange drinks and there's orange juice. And so it's our recommendation that children be allowed to choose the chocolate milk over the juice.
We have to remember, too, that those 12 grams of sugar is only in 4 ounces. So if they drink 8 ounces, the same 8 ounces as they would be drinking in chocolate milk, they'd actually have 6 teaspoons of natural sugars that they would be getting.
So now let's talk about obesity and how do these two wonderful twins actually end up obese in their elementary years. So let's look at the national trends. You can see if you follow the green line is the line of the 6 to 11-year-olds, and that is the local data we have, and a lot of other districts do third grade BMIs like we do in Missoula. So in 1970, we reached the lowest point of childhood obesity, and it was, it looks like about 4%. And now our latest data on this graph has us at 17%. So that means that we've had an epidemic of childhood obesity, and we should be very concerned about this because we know that obesity is a very expensive disease as it manifests itself in diabetes, joint problems, asthma, etc. And we know we're going to look at some data on our third graders, but we do also know when we've measured 7th and 10th graders that kids that are obese or on the verge of being obese, as they get older, they gain even more weight. So that's the trend, is to gain weight, start gaining weight when you're younger, and to continue it actually through adulthood.
And so then we see from overweight, we see propensity of adults going into full stage obesity, and it's pretty sad.
So let's look at our childhood obesity rates. We have been doing third grade BMI since 2008. We do all of the schools in Missoula County, but let's look at the trend data that we have here. So our latest data that we can present is that in third grade, we had 25% of children above the normal weight, according to the CDC charts and their formula. So of those, 15% were overweight and 10% were obese. In seventh grade, it jumped to overall 29% were above the healthy weight. And in 10th grade, it was 32%. And so that trend data that we showed you on the previous slide for teens is actually been measured in Missoula to be true. And so our data on the right side of the slide shows the different numbers that we have experienced since 2008. Now, we're pretty tickled that we're kind of showing a decrease from 2013 through 2016. And it might not look like a big decrease, but actually it is significant. Researchers indicate that 50% of these children will become obese as adults. And we know that being obese as adults is a very difficult thing to cure. So some of the health risks that I talked about earlier: cardiovascular disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, high blood cholesterol, respiratory ailments, and orthopedic problems. And so we have kids that are in elementary school that are already taking high blood pressure and high blood cholesterol medications, and that are type 2 diabetics. The problem with the respiratory ailments is that the extra weight puts pressure on the diaphragm, and kids are not able to exercise as much or be comfortable exercising. And then the orthopedic problems have to do with extra weight on those joints. And if you've ever been to a third grade, fourth grade class and you've watched kids run laps or run to the other end of the gym, it's really sad to see the really heavy kids that you know are in pain trying to run and keep up with their peers. So let's talk about some of the emotional impact of childhood obesity. It leads to stigmatizing, stereotyping, and marginalization. So when I was just talking about kids that can't make it to the other end of the gym, that particular problem doesn't hurt the girls as much, but it definitely marginalizes boys that are overweight. Teasing and bullying is very common for kids that are overweight. And the result of that is lower self-esteem, negative body image, and it all can lead to depression. We live in a very bizarre culture because our TV and pop stars and rock stars, they all have an image, and actresses and actors, they all have an image of, for the girls, very lean, and for the boys, very muscular and lean. And yet, we live in a culture where the food options make it very difficult, especially for financially challenged households, to serve food that would keep a child in a normal weight range. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult. So obesity in boys trends, dropout rates with obesity increased. Being the last chosen on sports teams is very embarrassing for kids. They would rather not be chosen at all. They don't feel cool, and they don't feel as though they fit in, and so that lowers their self-esteem. Increased rates of depression and withdrawal and isolation. And one of the things we know about lower self-esteem is it opens kids up to be vulnerable to taking risks in other areas of their life. So they might be more likely to hook up with kids that are using drugs in high school or are involved in truancy or other illegal activities. With girls, there's also an increased dropout rate with obesity, And there is an increased teen pregnancy rate with girls that are obese. And what's interesting and what might not seem obvious is that obese teen girls are almost 3 times as likely as others to have had sex before age 30, and 30% more likely to have had sex with more than 3 partners during their teen years. And so you might think, well, that doesn't make sense since we talked about the image for teen girls is to be slender. But I think it has to do with the fact that when you're isolated and you're depressed and you feel left out, that you're more willing to agree to have sex if that means being liked. And that just simply is my theory.
Let's look at how sugar affects memory, learning, and behavior. Keep calm. Call a school psychologist when the behavior gets bad, right? Sugar can actually be addictive. This is Nicole Avena. She's PhD. She did her undergraduate work at Princeton, and she got her PhD at Rockefeller. She's written over 50 articles and is very well respected in the area of nutrition. So we're going to show you this video. I think it'll speak to you better than we can speak in words.
Picture warm, gooey cookies, crunchy candies, velvety cakes, waffle cones piled high with ice cream. Is your mouth watering? Are you craving dessert? Why? What happens in the brain that makes sugary foods so hard to resist? Sugar is a general term used to describe a class of molecules called carbohydrates, and it's found in a wide variety of food and drink. Just check the labels on sweet products you buy. Glucose, fructose, sucrose, maltose, lactose, dextrose, and starch are all forms of sugar. So are high fructose corn syrup, fruit juice, raw sugar, and honey. And sugar isn't just in candies and desserts. It's also added to tomato sauce, yogurt, dried fruit, flavored waters, or granola bars. Since sugar is everywhere, it's important to understand how it affects the brain. What happens when sugar hits your tongue? And does eating a little bit of sugar make you crave more? You take a bite of cereal. The sugars it contains activate the sweet taste receptors, part of the taste buds on the tongue. These receptors send a signal up to the brainstem, and from there it forks off into many areas of the forebrain, one of which is the cerebral cortex. Different sections of the cerebral cortex process different tastes: bitter, salty, umami, and in our case, sweet. From here, the signal activates the brain's reward system. This reward system is a series of electrical and chemical pathways across several different regions of the brain. It's a complicated network, but it helps answer a single subconscious question. Should I do that again? That warm, fuzzy feeling you get when you taste Grandma's chocolate cake? That's your reward system saying, yes. And it's not just activated by food. Socializing, sexual behavior, and drugs are just a few examples of things and experiences that also activate the reward system. But overactivating this reward system kickstarts a series of unfortunate events: loss of control, craving, and increased tolerance to sugar. Let's get back to our bite of cereal. It travels down into your stomach and eventually into your gut. And guess what? There are sugar receptors here too. They're not taste buds, but they do send signals telling your brain that you're full, or that your body should produce more insulin to deal with the extra sugar you're eating. The major currency of our reward system is dopamine, an important chemical or neurotransmitter. There are many dopamine receptors in the forebrain, but they're not evenly distributed. Certain areas contain dense clusters of receptors, and these dopamine hotspots are a part of our reward system. Drugs like alcohol, nicotine, or heroin send dopamine into overdrive, leading some people to constantly seek that high. In other words, to be addicted. Sugar also causes dopamine to be released, though not as violently as drugs. And sugar is rare among dopamine-inducing foods. Broccoli, for example, has no effect, which probably explains why it's so hard to get kids to eat their veggies. Speaking of healthy foods, let's say you're hungry and decide to eat a balanced meal. You do, and dopamine levels spike in the reward system hotspots. But if you eat that same dish many days in a row, dopamine levels will spike less and less, eventually leveling out. That's because when it comes to food, the brain evolved to pay special attention to new or different tastes. Why? 2 reasons. First, to detect food that's gone bad. And second, because the more variety we have in our diet, the more likely we are to get all the nutrients we need. To keep that variety up, we need to be able to recognize a new food, and more importantly, we need to want to keep eating new foods. And that's why the dopamine levels off when a food becomes boring. Now back to that meal. What happens if in place of the healthy, balanced dish, you eat sugar-rich food instead? If you rarely eat sugar, or don't eat much at a time, the effect is similar to that of the balanced meal. But if you eat too much, the dopamine response does not level out. In other words, eating lots of sugar will continue to feel rewarding. In this way, sugar behaves a little bit like a drug. It's one reason people seem to be hooked on sugary foods. So think back to all those different kinds of sugar. Each one is unique, but every time any sugar is consumed, it kickstarts a domino effect in the brain that sparks a rewarding feeling. Too much too often, and things can go into overdrive. So yes, overconsumption of sugar can have addictive effects on the brain. But a wedge of cake once in a while won't hurt you.
Now that you've watched the video, we are going to kind of take you through what might happen to kids that are in your classroom. Let's say a child gets up and has a high sugar breakfast. And what we know is, for any of us, me included, that like sugar, once you've eaten sugar during the day, you really are looking for your next hit, so to speak. And so what sugar does, the plus of sugar, if you're on a hike or running a marathon, you want fast-acting sugar. Because, first of all, your brain only operates on sugar, on glucose. And so any kind of sugar that you consume is turned into glucose. And what glucose does is it spikes your blood glucose level. And so you feel up, you feel high, you feel like, oh, I can make it, I can do it. I'm awake now at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when your computer looks fuzzy to you. And so that feels good. And then the thing about sugar is that it can fall rapidly. And once it falls, your brain is then talking to you. I need more sugar, I need more sugar. So how does this affect a kid in your class? If the child in your class has only had a high sugar breakfast with no protein, with no fiber, no fruit, then when that blood sugar falls rapidly, that child cannot concentrate. That child's brain is saying, I need more sugar, I need more sugar. And especially the child or the children in your classroom that are used to a lot of sugar, they are now in a sugar deficit in their mind, and they will have hunger and cravings. And so even though they might not need calories, what happens with the sugar addiction is that you crave sugar, which of course are more calories. And so that becomes the perpetual cycle. You eat the sugar, the blood sugar spikes, the blood sugar falls, you get a hunger and craving for more sugar, you eat more sugar. So the crash, okay. So we've talked about consuming sugary products causes extreme spike in blood sugar. And we like that feeling. Everybody usually likes that feeling. And then there's the crash. And what you see in the crash are severe changes in mood swings, irritability, anxiety, fatigue, and the dreaded brain fog. So you can take a child in your class that actually is very capable of learning and learning at a high level. But if that child is on a high sugar diet and that child experiences the crash, then brain fog could come into play, which brain fog makes it almost impossible to learn. And if you have a child with a high sugar diet that has behavioral problems, mood swings could come into play when they experience the crash, irritability, anxiety, and fatigue. And what we know is chronically high levels of blood sugar have also led to feelings of depression. So depression keeps becoming a part of this problem that we're trying to address with diet and obesity. Okay, so we want to introduce you to some pediatric endocrinologists, some of their findings, and the difference in shortage of blood sugar between children and adults.
So if we consume too many carbs, and those are highly processed carbs, the body learns to expect those high levels of glucose. And once we get those high levels of glucose in, then too much insulin is released. And we see it causing our glucose levels to drop. And what happens when our glucose levels drop significantly? It leads to numerous side effects, and that includes shakiness, headache, irritability, confusion, insomnia, and craving more glucose. But the thing that we're finding is there's a difference in the shortage of blood sugar between children and adults. So in children, when their blood sugar drops, they're showing the symptoms of hypoglycemia when the blood sugar is not as low as it is with older adults. And one of the reasons this happens is because we have a release of adrenaline. That adrenaline surge comes about 4 hours after eating. And they're finding that for children, they're a lot more sensitive to this drop in blood sugar. And so then they have that release of adrenaline earlier, and they start feeling those effects of shakiness, headache, irritability, and so on at a much lower level of blood sugar.
And there's also a twofold rise in epinephrine levels in children versus adults. And I can really speak to this personally. My daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 7. And she, of course, still has it since there's not a cure for type 1. And when she would have a glucose drop as a child, it was very drastic mood change, much more than it is now when she has a glucose drop at the age of 37. So you don't have to be a type 1 diabetic to have that response. But for children that you see problem behaviors in, and problem learning, some of that can be attributed to high sugar diets.
And then we have this cycle of poor nutrition and educational outcomes that goes round and round. You start out with a poor diet in childhood, and then you're going to have some lower academic performance at school. We'll be talking about that more in a few minutes. And then if you do have less education, you drop out of school, maybe you don't go to college, you have fewer job opportunities and lower socioeconomic status. And then as your family expands, the economic status and lack of education lead to continued poor dietary choices. It just happens because those cheaper foods are the junk foods and not the foods that are healthy for you. That whole foods, fruits and vegetables and whole grains, they tend to be more pricey. And so it's hard for these families to eat healthy. And then it leads again to the poor diet in childhood and lower academic performance. The whole cycle goes round and round.
And earlier I talked about stigmatizing, and research shows that two people can apply for the same job with the same background, the same skills, and the person that appears leaner will get that job over a person that is overweight or obese. There is a lot of research on that. And you can go to even restaurants here in Missoula or shops and take a look at all of the help, the people that are waiting on you. And in a lot of places, you will find a stereotype of lean young women or lean young men and women in certain clothing stores in Missoula. And so there is a sense of injustice towards people that are larger than the norm in our culture. This is what we suggest you do at this point. we suggest that you step away from or stand up from your computer, and we are going to take you through a brain break. And we like brain breaks to happen anytime anyone has been sitting longer than 40 minutes. So this includes your classroom, this includes your staff meetings, this includes when you're watching TV, you need a brain break. And so we're going to show you one of our favorite brain breaks. This is a site called Move to Learn, and we hope you enjoy that.
Get your brain to fully turn on and activate up every neuron. Come on now.
Young boys and girls, the brain is king. Now let's activate some neurons. Let's go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Move it.
Get your brain to fully turn on and activate up every neuron.
Move to learn.
Move along.
And move to learn.
This wonderful song.
And move to learn. And move to learn. Let's roll it.
Feel the calories as they start to burn.
Yes.
While we
Yes.
move to learn.
Yes.
Back at school.
Take it down low.
You know it's cool.
Take it down high.
Don't act.
To the left. To the right.
You know
To
the
the middle. Bag it up. Bag it up. Run in place. 1, 2, 1, 2. Here we go.
It's not surprising that
Move it, move it, move it. Move it, move it, move it. Move it, move it, move it.
Physical activity.
Faster. Chop, chop. Hands up. Chop, chop. Chop, 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 chop. Walk place. Walk in place. Walk in place. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. You got it. You got it. You got. Oh yeah. Stop and stretch. And stretch. And stretch. And stretch. And stretch. And stretch.
lesson is way too verbose.
And stretch.
I'm tired of close to comatose. And I'm
Elbow.
keeping
Pop.
it far.
Elbow. Pop.
When I say
Elbow.
move to, you
Pop.
say learn.
Elbow. Pop.
When I say
Elbow.
move to, you
Pop.
say learn. Move to,
Elbow.
move
Pop.
to,
Elbow. Pop.
back at school. Catch that?
Everybody smiling. Come on.
You know it's
Let's
cool.
run. Let's run.
Don't act.
Yeah, baby. Show me that smile now.
You know the rule.
Change it up a little bit. Here we go. Jump rope.
Everybody,
Boxer style.
let me hear you say move.
Boxer style.
Say move.
Boxer style. Now cross it over. Boxer style.
Say move.
Boxer style.
Now move
Boxer
to learn.
style.
I said move
Cross it over. Run in place. Here we go.
to learn. Say move to learn.
Faster pace.
Say move to learn. I said move.
Chop, 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 chop.
Come on, move.
Chop.
What? Even more,
Chop.
even more, even more. Come on, move.
Chop. Don't stop. Walk it out. Walk it out. Walk it out. Walk it out. Let's wipe that window. While you stepping. Wipe and wipe and wipe. Change it up. Change it up. Change it up. Change it up. I don't see you smiling. Reach and reach and reach. Are you smiling? Are you smiling? Come on. Work that brain. 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 You got it. You got it. Here we go. Basketball. And dribble. And step. And dribble. And step. And dribble. And step. Change it over. Change it over. And dribble. And step. Left hand. Dribble. And dribble. Left hand. Back to the front. Now let's shoot. Oh yeah, let's shoot. All right, let's shoot. All right, let's shoot. Show that form, baby. Shoot. Come on now, shoot. Run in place. Got defense now. Hop. And hop. And hop. And hop. And hop and hop and hop. And step. And step. Are you smiling? Are you smiling? Brain. Work that brain. Work that brain. Work that brain. Knee tap. Go. Tap. And tap. And tap. And tap. And tap. And tap. Here we go. Slow it down. And pop. And pop. And pop. And pop. Here we go. Walk, walk, walk. Here we go. Let's slow it down. Let's slow it down. Let's slow it down.
Don't
Again.
fool.
Take a deep breath.
You know the rule. Everybody.
Get that oxygen to the brain. Again. Again.
Everybody.
Again. Interlock those fingers.
Say move.
Stretch it out.
Say move.
Stretch it out. Now walk. Now stop. Hold it. And change arms.
Move to learn. Say move to learn.
Other side.
Move to learn. I said move to learn. I said louder. Come on.
Roll the neck out.
Even more, even more, even more. Come on.
Change direction. Other side. Other side. Hold it. And down. Thank you, boys and girls. Thank you, teachers. Teachers, their brains are activated and they're ready to learn.
You know the rule. Everybody move.
Okay, now that you've had your brain break, let's dig back into it and talk about metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is defined as risk behaviors that raise your risk for heart disease, other health problems such as diabetes and stroke. And what is metabolic syndrome? Well, we tend to see a larger waistline, that apple shape. We see high triglyceride levels. We see low HDL cholesterol level, high blood pressure, and high fasting blood sugar. Now, metabolic syndrome, again, was one of those very rare syndromes in children back before the 70s, but we see it quite often now. And the problem is metabolic syndrome has a lot of effect on your academic performance and on your behavior. What we found is that adolescents who do have metabolic syndrome are more likely to lose volume in their hippocampus, which affects the frontal lobe executive function, and we'll be studying a little bit more about that. You can see that the hippocampus is near the brainstem, and the frontal lobe is where all of our executive functions happen, and that's on the other side. But there are pathways that the hippocampus initiates that release dopamine, and we'll be looking at that. And that, again, is kind of like little presents that you receive, little rewards, and so you crave more and more of it. So if we look at the hippocampus and dopamine, we know that dopamine is a hormone that conveys feelings of pleasure when released. We also know that sugar consumption causes the release of dopamine, and that dopamine release is kind of like a little present, a little reward to your brain. It makes you feel good. Well, our theory is that the more sugar we eat, the more dopamine that is released, and the more pleasure we feel. And you can see how through these pathways that pleasure and reward system affects many areas of the brain. Now, there's a vicious cycle of sugar intake and brain function. We know that the hippocampus, one of its chief responsibilities is for remembering. So, first of all, we have internal hunger, right? And so the next thing that happens is we have satiety cues, and then we remember what we eat. Well, if the hippocampus is not working right, then we don't have that memory. It has to do with something called brain-derived neurotrophin factor, and that's decreased when children and adults are consuming way too much sugar, and that causes decrease in the nerve synapses and decrease in memory.
And so basically, we have an internal hunger, and with children that have a high sugar diet, they eat, but they don't realize that they're full, that they're satiated. And so their satiation cues are malformed at that point. And so they feel hungry again, and then they don't remember what they ate, which is very troubling. I can remember working in a school, and there was a child that was very obese, and I would observe him in the lunchroom, and he would eat his own lunch, and then he would go around and he would beg the kids for some of their food. And for the really lean kids that their satiation cues were intact, they would say, "Yeah, I'm full, take my food." But he could not measure how satiated he was. Okay, so we can't do experiments on children when we know there's a negative outcome. But those friends of ours, the rats, we can do experiments on the rats. And so we want to share with you a study that is very primary in this field of study. And rats exhibited damaged nerve responses and decreased communication between brain cells. So think about the children sitting in your classroom. So do you want damaged nerve responses and decreased communication? No, that does not make for a good learner. So insulin resistance in the brain
Is increased.
increased when there's overconsumption of sugar. So what the insulin does, what's interesting about insulin, it's like a key. It's released by your pancreas when your pancreas reads how much blood sugar is in your system. It releases the insulin, and the insulin goes to your cells, and it opens your cells so the blood glucose can get in so you can have energy. If there's too much of it, then it's stored in the fat cells. With rats who overconsume sugar, they had insulin resistance in the brain. So their brain cells were not able to respond to the insulin to put the energy in. And then if the energy can't get into the brain cells, then cognition is negatively affected. So let's look at cognitive decline related to poor diet with high sugar intake. So let's look at these different functions of the brain: attention, memory, speed, creativity, flexibility, and focus. These are the functions that make students really good learners. Because you know that if they're not paying attention to you and what you're asking them to do, then there's no way they can get the information that they need to memorize. And you also know that the speed in which they can learn highly impacts their ability to move on at different levels. Creativity, flexibility are very important functions of the brain, and being able to focus. So if you have a child with a high sugar intake and all of these are flat or some of these are flat, that child is not going to be able to learn at his or her capability. And it makes your work that much more difficult. And a lot of these have to do with behavior also. For example, attention. So you tell the students that they're going to get in line to go down to music. And I can almost bet that each of you have 3 or 4 kids that aren't paying attention to you. And so you have to repeat it and maybe repeat it again and maybe even decide that you need to intervene in some way. And so what we're hoping for is a rollback in sugar intake in all kids' diets, because we know that teachers really need kids sitting in their classroom that have nutrient-dense diets. Also, research suggests that obesity is associated with poor academic performance beginning as early as kindergarten. So this is a study that followed 6,200 plus kids, K through 5. And the kids who were obese scored lower on math tests at all grade levels. You know, that's pretty significant. First of all, it's a very large study. And would obesity be the only factor that those kids scored lower? No. But the fact that the obese kids did score lower is something to pay attention to.
Now we're going to look at grade comparison of students and pop consumption in 2016. This actually came from the Montana Office of Public Instruction. I had seen a slide by CDC that was a little bit older, maybe 2009. And so I contacted OPI. They gave me some information about grades, and I'm talking about A, B, C, D's, and F's, and pop consumption. It was really telling. If children did not drink a pop in the last week, and we're not talking about diet pop, but sugary pop, you can see that there was a prevalence of A's, followed by B's, C's, and then D's and F's. Only 14.5% of those children who did not consume a pop were getting D's and F's. Now let's look at children who did drink sugar-sweetened pops, 1 or more a day in the last week, and we see almost exactly a mirror image where there's a higher proportion of D's and F's, like 37.5% D's and F's. Your C's were about 27.4%, B's 19.3, and A's 11.7. And although this is not a causation, because there are many, many other factors in a child's life that might affect their grades than just the consumption of pop, but it kind of goes with a correlation that we're seeing these children that are not having healthy diets and they're drinking more pops usually have poor academic performance. And this is right here in Montana. So empty calories, we know that those empty calories of junk food, high sugar foods fill you up. And so there isn't room for those healthier fruits and vegetables, lean kinds of protein, if you're filling up on all of those junk foods. And that way, you're not getting those nutrients we really need for our body. We know just a couple examples are iron deficiency. So if you're eating lots of junk food, you're not getting enough iron in your diet. And that iron deficiency actually causes attention span decrease, alertness decrease, and learning problems increase. Another one that's fairly significant is the insufficiency of B vitamins. And we know from nutritionists across the nation that insufficiency will lead to forgetfulness, moodiness, dizziness, and reduced alertness. All these things that contribute to the learning ability of a child. And yet, if we're eating nutrient-rich diets, those that are high in fruit and vegetables, whole grains, plenty of fiber, dairy, and protein, we're seeing it increase in their academic performance. They're less likely to fail literacy tests than peers who eat a less complete and poor nutrition diet. So are we saying you can have no sugar ever, no added sugar ever, no sugar? No, what we're saying is in compliance with the dietary guidelines for 2015 to 2020, where we're talking about eating patterns across the lifespan. We want to make sure that we're focusing on variety, nutrient density, and the correct amount of calories for a person. We also want to limit calories from added sugars and saturated fats and reduce our sodium intake. So what we're really saying is there should be no excess added sugar in your diet. Some added sugar is normal. We all eat added sugars, but we should really try to control that excess, especially in children who are trying to do well in school. We want to shift to healthier food and beverage choices. And if you're doing the junk food and beverages, we're not getting those nutrients that we do need. We want to support healthy eating patterns for all.
So how do we prepare our kids to be ready to learn? Because that's our goal in presenting this workshop to teachers. Well, look at this. It looks like you have everything under control. Now, I honestly have to say that I've been in classrooms that look a little bit like this, and they can be great classrooms. I don't suspect you could do this all day long, but sometimes there's a time and a place for everything.
So what we really want to do is keep it in the green zone with good nutrition. I know that most schools here in Missoula know about the zones of regulation, that you use this to help children self-control themselves and to know what state of alertness they're in, how they're feeling. So we want them in that calm state of alertness, which is the green zone. And that's where they're happy, they're calm, they're feeling okay, they're focused, they're ready to learn. There are times and places for other zones, and children should be able to recognize those and then be able to have some intervention. So in the yellow zone, we expect kids out on the playground to be silly, wiggly, excited, and loss of some control. We really want to eliminate the red zone where kids are really over the top and out of control, or the blue zone where they're really sad, sick, tired, and bored, moving slowly. We want to keep them in that green zone as often as possible when they're in the classroom so that they are ready to learn. And just to review the behavior results of nutrient-poor diet, we've talked about difficulty in listening, irritability to focus or stay on task. They're easily distracted kids. They can't learn when they're distracted, can they? They're irritable. Maybe they have unexpected anger and or lashing out. And this is, over time. of not having the proper nutrients in their diet. They're restless. It's hard to sit still. They're quick to frustration and sometimes hard to calm down. I'm sure you've had students like this in your classroom. Very challenging because when they're misbehaving, it's hard to teach to those children who are behaving and ready to learn.
So how does this relate to the school's role? Now, we know that we can't move in to the homes where these kids are being raised, and you can't. And we also know that our culture has set families up for failure when it comes to diet. In Missoula, if you have a mom that's working 2 jobs, single mom, paying an exorbitant amount of rent, she's got 3 kids, and Arby's offers 5 for $5, where is that family going to eat that night? That's where that family's going to eat. Because good food is expensive and poor food is cheap. And that's what has happened and has allowed to happen in our country now. So what can we do? What small piece can we in the district and you as teachers control? So school programs that target health promotion, improve self-esteem, mental health, and quality of life long term. So there are programs galore that are available that can target health promotion in the area of nutrition. So what do healthy schools look like? So here's another one of our little add-ins. We're concerned about your son. He's the only one at school who treats everyone with respect. So I don't know that that's true. This is yet another example of a cartoon, an exaggeration. But what we believe in, that the district should have the philosophy of do no harm. So, like I mentioned, we can't control it at home. We can't control it before school. We can't control it after school. But what can we do during the school hours? Yes, we can do a lot, and we can do it from the perspective that we will do no harm. And if we do no harm, what that means is then we are doing good by the kids in our schools.
So we've made up a couple of recipes for you. This one is a Eat Smart Healthy Nutrition recipe. And this is what a healthy school day would look like nutrition-wise. Number 1, there would be breakfast in the classroom, or we call it breakfast after the bell. It could be grab-and-go breakfast, but kids need breakfast to eat, to do well in school. Many of these kids haven't eaten it since the day before. Maybe even at lunchtime, they might have not had dinner. And so they're starving, and they really do need breakfast to get those glucose levels up to where they can start learning. Another one is the catch, go, slow, whoa foods concept. We want to eat more go foods than slow foods, more slow foods than whoa foods. We save those whoa foods for special occasions. This go, slow, and whoa, you'll find it in all of the Missoula area public schools from kindergarten through 8th grade. They're using the catch curriculum, go, slow, and whoa. You'll see those posted in the cafeteria, and many of our rural schools too in our area are using the catch curriculum. We want USDA healthier school meals because they set standards for what a meal can look like in terms of protein, carbohydrates, fats, and added sugars. We want smart snack compliance. I don't know if you've heard of the smart snack in schools rule, but it limits the amount of calories, fat, sugar that can be in a snack. Also smart snack compliance, and that's any food that is sold during the school day. It's a USDA rule, and snacks must meet the criteria for sugar, sodium, and fat and calories during the school day. Those aren't snacks that are served during classroom time, but those that are sold during the school day. Fundraising, school stores, vending machines. We also know recess before lunch helps in the recipe of a school day because the kids aren't hurrying through their lunch to get out and play. They get out and play and work up an appetite, and they're ready for lunch. Rewards. Now, we're requesting that rewards, and this is a best practice now, it's not any kind of legislative rule, but we want rewards to be Smart Snack compliant or non-food rewards, because that's the healthiest thing that we can do in our school recipe regarding rewards. We don't want to give them sugary snacks, donut parties, etc., for having good behavior, but we want to separate those rewards from food. So for healthy fundraising during the day, what we want to see is alternative fundraising that really is healthy, either healthy foods or things that are just fun, like dance parties and walkathons and bike rodeos, those things that are really fun and get the kids to living a healthier lifestyle. And we also, during a healthy nutrition school day, want to make sure that there is food security, after school, weekends, and breaks. And so we have the backpack program where we can send food home for those needy children who really need food after school, weekends, and breaks.
And so it isn't just about what kids eat, it's about how often and how much they move. And we know that both physical activity and nutrition, good nutrition, ward off obesity. And so we have a recipe for what a healthy, active school day looks like. So first, we would want to see more kids doing what's called active transportation. And that's where they either walk, roll, or ride to school. And we started a new program, Walking Wednesdays, at Chief Charlo. We would love to see that program expand. Also, it's important to realize that we have safe route to school maps for all the elementary schools, and those maps should be on your websites. And it shows a 5-minute walk and a 10-minute walk and a 5-minute ride and a 10-minute ride to help parents understand that if their child lives 2 or 3 blocks away from the school, it doesn't necessitate a drive to school. And another best practice is before school activities called 0 hour. We have the Morning Move program now at Hawthorne, Franklin, Russell, and Lowell. And what this is the playground is open from 8 o'clock till the bell rings, and we have volunteers and equipment for the kids to have an active recess before school, because we know that that helps turn on those brains. We encourage you teachers to have your kids show up for Morning Move if you're in those 4 schools. And then another best practice and another part of our recipe is the brain breaks. We don't want kids sitting any longer than 40 minutes. And most of you have had brain break training. We will be out again during the school year 2018-19 to do brain break training. Active recess is another important piece of kids being healthy. And studies show that if you as a teacher say to your kids, you know, I want you to go out and be really active during recess. When you come in, I want your faces to be pink and red and sweaty, that they listen to you and that does get them moving. And we would love to see more available free access to physical activity outside of the school. So that is the recipe for the healthy school day for kids from the physical activity viewpoint. Let's just kind of talk about what we can do. The core shows what we want to have happen: student access to healthy foods and beverages at school. What we know is that the green section, school stores and snack bars, vending machines, a la carte foods, and in-school fundraisers, those are all things that are actually controlled by the USDA rules. We are in the process, we meaning the Graduation Matters Wellness Council nutrition team, in making sure that our school stores and snack bars, our vending machines, our a la carte food, and our fundraisers are in compliance with USDA. School meals are controlled by USDA, and we know that our nutrition program at MCPS really works hard to have healthy meals. We also know that we have to have access to drinking water. The kids need water. And the one thing that we really want to see change is what happens with classroom celebrations, events, and rewards. We know that that is a piece that teachers control because you control your own classrooms. And we feel that MCPS school district should be the #1 AA school as far as health. And we are asking that you consider how you handle classroom celebrations, events, and rewards.
So the CDC has recommendations for dietary behavior issues. And number one is that you have a school breakfast program. Why? Because we've shown that increased academic success correlates with having a school breakfast program. We know that there's reduced absenteeism and there's improved cognitive performance. And we're asking you as teachers to consider, if you haven't already, to be receptive to having a breakfast after the bell for these very reasons. And we have schools that have started school breakfast programs for breakfast in the classroom and breakfast after the bell that have been very successful. And some of those problems that teachers might imagine, like interference with learning or it's just too messy, it really doesn't happen. Once you get the kids trained and you're working with having that school breakfast in the classroom, you'll find out that their attention span will grow and that you actually, those few minutes that they take to eat breakfast while you're doing roll call or prepping the students for the day will actually lead to much increased academics and decrease in behavior problems. Deficits in our insufficient food intake, we know that there will be lower grades, decreased cognitive performance, higher absenteeism and tardiness, having to repeat a grade over, and inability to focus. So the CDC really recommends that we consider the nutrition of our school children in order to help them perform better. So what is the best practice for the student nutrition during the school day? We know that all food and beverages should meet the USDA guidelines, and that means if a child answers a math problem correctly, we don't give them a Skittle, we give them a pat on the back or something else instead of that food reward. The only exceptions are lunches brought from home. Those we have no control over. We need to remember our goal, and that was the school does no harm nutritionally to the students, that we only do things that will lead to their success.
And so one of the things that we know will help students, especially the older students, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, is to teach them how to look at the media that they're constantly being bombarded with and how to discern what the companies are trying to sell them. And so we're going to look at a new campaign that Coca-Cola puts out. And it's so interesting now because most products that are being sold have to do with how they will make you feel, not what you're going to get from them nutritionally, but how they will make you feel. And so this is a short video that will show that.
Darling, I was made for you.
Several years ago, I was out at Big Sky in 9th grade health class doing a presentation on body image. And I was talking to them about obesity, and I asked them the question, when they were 9 and 10, did they beg their parents to take them to McDonald's? And almost every kid nodded, yes. And so I said, well, it was the McDonald's hamburger was the best hamburger. And they thought back and they shook their heads no. And so I said, was it the French fries? Was it the French fries that were so good that you wanted the French fries? And they said no. And I said, well, what was it? Why did you bug, and cause havoc in your family so that you could go to McDonald's? And I already knew the answer, and they said it was for the toy. And so what we find are companies that they are not concerned about our children. They're concerned about making money. And they will sell whatever and find a way for kids to want it. And one of the ways that the fast food places, especially McDonald's, is notorious for this. And they will have a series of toys that are connected to a certain movie. And so week 1, you get maybe this particular bad guy. I don't know from what movie that is. And then week 2, you'll get maybe the good guy from that movie. So now the kid is wanting to get every single figure from that movie at McDonald's. And so it's a constant fight that parents have with their kids. And there are San Francisco does not allow any toys to be put into kids' meals at this point because they believe that it just encourages bad habits. And another thing, a kid's meal could have the default, instead of the fries, it could be the apples, and instead of the pop, it could be milk. And if that were the case, the junior meal at McDonald's would be a fairly nutrient-dense meal compared to what you see here. And so it isn't just McDonald's, Twinkies. We have another example of food advertising to kids is Shrek advertising Twinkies with green filling, which who knows what that's made up of. And then we could go down any supermarket aisle to the cereal aisle. And it is just amazing how many cereals are marketed to kids using fun figures, using catchphrases. It's very difficult for parents to choose the Cheerios down there with very low added sugar to the Frosted Cheerios. Look at the difference in the packaging. The Frosted Cheerios in the middle of the top row is definitely geared for children, where the older Cheerio box with the heart-shaped dish in the bottom row is a more neutral advertising. So it's very difficult. Our culture has made it very difficult. But to teach kids this is what we would like to see happen, where they can say, oh, look what they're trying to make me buy that because doesn't it look fun and doesn't it look inviting, and the colors, they're the colors I like. There's a lot of research that goes into marketing to children, and they even do focus groups with children as young as 4, 5, and 6 to find out how to pitch their product to kids. When it comes to eating, I just can't get him to think outside the box, and that's the problem. The number of ads that kids see on TV, which the only control you as teachers have is to try to teach kids to start thinking about what they're seeing on TV and thinking about how products are advertised to them and realizing that they're being manipulated.
It's over 95% of those ads for food are for the junk food, not for the healthy food.
Right.
And so it's really hard to battle that in the classroom when they're seeing it, watching TV at home, as something that would be really wonderful to have and make you feel good. One of the programs that you're using in schools here in Missoula is the CATCH program. And we talked a little bit earlier about the GO, the SLOW, and the WOW foods. If we could get kids to understand that most of their food should be GO, that's almost any time, and that's things like whole wheat bread, fruits and vegetables. The sometimes food, which are things like white bread and baked chips, and then the once in a while food, which are things like donuts and ice cream. It will really help them because I tell you, they use these Go, Slow, and WOW foods back in their homes when they're talking with their parents. And so it's a concept that they learn early in life that may last a lifetime. So what is a catch lesson like? Well, it has a physical activity program and a nutrition program. There are classroom activities, student homework, there's a parent component and a PTA component. So it's really widespread and it's sustainable. And there's a grade level appropriate curriculum which incorporates English, science, math, history, physical activity. It's really fun. It's interactive learning, pre-K through 8th grade. If you haven't tried Catch Lessons, I suggest you contact Lisa Timms. Her information is there on the slide. She works at Providence, and there's her phone number.
So how do you have a healthy classroom? Well, first of all, you want to be a role model to your students. And there's a couple ways of doing that. If you are at your desk drinking water, you're being a great role model. If you're at your desk drinking Pepsi, that isn't being a great role model. If you want the Pepsi and need the Pepsi, save the Pepsi for the student or for the staff lounge. Serve breakfast in the classroom or breakfast after the bell. This is a great way to have a healthy classroom and a healthy start to the day. And if you have questions about the breakfast program that is being served by the district, please contact Ed or Stacy at Food Services, because you would be surprised at how healthy the food that they serve is. And then another example of how to have a healthy classroom is to have non-food rewards like lunch with the teacher, movement activities, reading a child's favorite book, trinkets and trash, or just good old plain praise. We know that kids, there's a variety of ways that kids feel good about themselves. They do like rewards, but think of the reward as something that does no harm. And think of it as a way to connect with your students in a more positive way. And then another way is just to talk nutrition. Whenever you have a chance to teach them what it means to eat well, it will be to their advantage, because we want kids, instead of having them bug their parents to go to McDonald's or buy them a candy bar, to buy them fruit. And so your Catch curriculum has a lot of ideas. MSU has the expanded food and nutrition program. There's SNAP Ed, there's Farm to School, there's My Plate. There's a million curriculums out there that you can use. We understand that nutrition is not part of the core curriculum, but we also understand that it is vital to kids' long-term health and productivity. So any way you can slip it in is great.
I think of it this way. Throughout your life, from the time you're born till the time you leave this earth, you'll be eating. So nutrition plays a really important part. We won't always use advanced mathematics, science, history. They're all important subjects to learn, and they make us a more rounded human being. But what we do every single day is to eat, and if we can teach good nutrition in the classroom and help these kids form healthy habits at a young age, they'll much more likely to keep those habits throughout their life, and that means decrease in chronic disease.
So let's sum it up. 1, excess sugar during the school day may cause your students both learning and behavior problems. So we are really asking you to rethink what your policy in your classroom is. Best practice is to limit added sugars during the school day or all the time. A well-balanced diet supports learning. Practicing good nutrition at school will help form healthier nutrition habits for life. Healthy nutrition can be incorporated into the classroom across the curriculum.
And what we're seeing is with middle school and high school students, they're becoming environmentally conscious, and they want to eat healthier foods, and they want to go green, and they want less waste. And when you have processed foods, overly processed foods, there's a lot of waste. And so we're seeing people move back towards the eating healthy foods and feeling better about themselves. And that's really what is so needed in today's classrooms. It's just to have kids feeling good about themselves.
You know, there's just so many ways to celebrate kids and let them celebrate their birthdays, their achievements, or just to have fun. And it does not have to do with food. I'll give you an example. If birthdays were celebrated in your classroom, and every child that had a birthday during the school year brought in large cupcakes that are frosted, that would be 15,000 calories that they have consumed during your school year. And we know that we're not giving children the opportunity to work those calories off in gym class or out on the playground. And so just think about the kid that, and for some kids that would be those would be the only cupcakes they would get all year. But for other kids, that's just part of a high sugar diet. So we're really asking you to think about the concept of do no harm.
We have some resources listed for you here for non-food rewards, healthier snack options, and healthy fundraisers. These aren't the only resources out there, and we welcome you to contact us if you need help in obtaining resources to help your classroom be healthier. And that's what the Graduation Wellness Council is all about, is supporting you as teachers in the school district to have the optimum classroom environment.
And just in closing, I guess I'd like to say that we feel that MCPS has really made some wonderful steps in improving the health of the student during the school day. We hope you support the efforts and hope that you can think about what you personally can change in your classroom to make it a healthier classroom. If you ever want to come to one of our meetings, they're posted on the website, the date and time. We'd be happy to hear from you. If you want to email Rebecca or myself, this is the information that you can email us, and we will answer any questions you have. We believe firmly that children deserve to take advantage of your great teaching skills, and one of the ways they can do that is if they are well fed and well exercised. So good luck, and we hope to hear from you.
And thank you very much for being with us today.